What are the most common problems that can lead to fraud in China? Fraud is existent in all jurisdictions around the world, not just in China, although you hear a lot about it because there's a bad reputation in China around fraud. But the question ultimately is, how can you prevent fraud from occurring in your own subsidiary in China? And it's simple. For me, there are four main things that can lead to fraud. One is communication and control. The other one is turning a blind eye. The one is being brought into unethical situations. And the fourth is inexperienced staff. Over the next 4 days, I'm going to be pinpointing one of these items and explaining how it can be caused and how you can prevent it. So the first one we're going to talk about today is communication and control. The issue ultimately is that nobody can get on the ground in China unless they want to go through a 14 or 21-day quarantine period. It's difficult to get the documents to get in. So what are you going to do sitting in your headquarters? How are you going to control your organization in China? And how are you going to improve the communication between yourself and China? It's ultimately creating that bridge. I think the first thing you need to figure out is what data is vital to you. What data do you need to make sure your company in China is doing what it should be doing in order to achieve its goals and its objectives? Is that data financial data? Is it sales data? Is it procurement data? Is it marketing data? What is it? And don't make it too extensive, right? You don't want to hire an individual just to give you the data that you need on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. But you've got to understand what you need to receive in terms of numbers, in terms of information, to make sure that the company is in compliance and is doing what it's supposed to be doing. The next step is creating SOPs. So what are SOPs? Well, SOPs are standard operating guidelines, which should be developed for every single action and division within your organization. And ultimately, they should be drafted by the division heads who know exactly what the procedures are within their department. So SOPs can be anything from how are the bank accounts being controlled? What are the step-by-step procedures? How are the company chops being used? What are the step-by-step procedures? How are the company licenses being used? What are the step-by-step procedures? It's also just generally SOPs in terms of the data that you need. If the finance department is required every Friday to give you a bank balance, or every Friday they're supposed to give you the ARs, or whatever the case might be, you need to dictate to them what information you need and what should be the standard operating procedure in place. The issue is the following. Most companies set up subsidiaries in China with no staff initially because they're using that company purely for transactions. But over time, they're going to start adding people. And this is where the dilemma arises. They start adding one person and they're like, Christina, one person we can control, we can communicate with. We don't need SOPs. We don't need operational guidelines. I don't have the time or the money to invest in that. Fine. If that's your prerogative, that's absolutely fine. If you don't want to place any priority in that, no issues. But don't come running to me when you're suddenly an office of 5, 6, 7 people and suddenly you can't control everything. What do you do then? And at that point, when you do have 5 or 6 people, your business would have scaled up to a level where your attention is needed critically. Why didn't you start off with that one person to develop those SOPs so that once you've got the next person on staff, you've got a training manual that's being developed because you are able to then train the next person on what should be taken over. And with the amount of high turnover, it would be critical for you to have SOPs in place so that it's an easy training tool to teach other people how your company operates. What are the requirements? I mean, let's not look at the financials. That is my expertise, but let's not look at the financials. Let's look at sales. What are your guidelines on providing discounts? What are your guidelines on payment terms? Who's checking on the payments? What are your guidelines on contracts and making sure they get signed? What's your guideline on the renewal of contracts? Who's in charge of all of that? These are the types of SOPs I'm referring to. And it's important to have that control through those SOPs to know that your company is, first of all, in compliance, that it's in good standing with the government, and that it is doing everything operationally and internally to make sure you're not winging it. We don't want to be one of these old timers from 15, 20 years ago that went into China because they didn't know anything, like myself, and we winged it. We winged it to the point where we didn't scale up until much longer because Then the light bulb appeared and we developed SOPs. Let's learn from us old timers, and let's make sure that the minute we get into China, we've got those SOPs being drafted and continuously revamped. Now, why am I bringing this subject up? It's because it's almost the end of October. And now is the time to look at your annual audit and compliance procedures that have to start happening and being planned now for the new year. Because audit for the fiscal year 2021 will begin as soon as the new year starts. Let's take that opportunity as we're planning for the audits and the compliances to relook at our SOPs, to get the team involved, not only in the budgeting aspect of everything, but also in the efficiency and operational aspect of the business. And let's improve on it. Every business can be improved. So today's issue, fraud can occur through the lack of control and communication because you don't have the right SOPs in place and you don't have the right communication tools like WeChat to communicate with your staff. We're going to look at the 3 other biggest problems later on in the week.